Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Kruiser and welcome to PJTV. We've all been hearing a lot about Detroit in recent years and the state of this once prosperous city. Poverty and blight are rampant and the city, which is also the birthplace of my dear mother, is going bankrupt. Joining me today to discuss this is filmmaker, writer, and all-around guiding light behind Mr. Smith Media, my good friend Ben Howe. Ben has just produced and directed a movie about the downfall of the Motor City. And Ben, here's the awkward part where I ask you how you're doing, even though we covered this off air already. How are you doing, Benjamin?
I am doing very well, Stephen. Thank you for asking.
Now, I'm curious, at what point in the Detroit saga of recent years exactly did you decide to tackle this as a film project?
It wasn't until the summer of 2013 that I decided I wanted to do it as a film project. Prior to that, I'd done some short videos, I'd written a lot of articles, but it was mostly me saying I didn't believe that the bailouts would work or that Detroit would be saved. It wasn't until 2013 that they officially declared that they were going bankrupt, at which point I thought something a little bit bigger needed to be done.
So we're obviously both political partisans here, and as you just alluded to, had some preconceived political notions about why this probably came about. Did you go into this deciding to rigidly stick to telling that story, or did you leave some room open for discovery?
I definitely left room open for discovery. My sense was that the bailouts didn't help, and my sense was that Detroit had seen years of decline based on over-involved government and cronyism. And I went in with the idea of let's interview people, both the city council, as well as experts and analysts and people in the media. Really, the way it ended up was mostly a result of who was willing to talk to me. I was able to get a person on the city council to talk to me. I tried to show his point of view, which is very optimistic about the future. But I also interviewed analysts and experts, and they kind of affirmed my position, but I certainly didn't lead them there.
Were there any legal barriers to dealing with the city council since the bankruptcy was proceeding at that point?
No, it's a very interesting dynamic going on in the city there. They have no say in anything essentially right now. There's an emergency manager running the city, and he'll listen to their advice, so to speak, but pretty much he can do whatever he wants. The best they can hope for is voting him out I think in September, at which point the governor can then appoint a brand new emergency manager and continue to keep power out of the hands of the city council. There's some concern that once the city council gets their hands on the power again, and the mayor as well, that Detroit is going to start getting back into its old habits.
Okay, we'll touch on that in a minute. Right now, I don't want to talk too much about the film's content because I want people to go watch the whole thing, which they can do. So let's talk about your decision to make it available for a while online and the underlying marketing strategy there.
Well, for me, it started this way. You may recall, Stephen, that I wrote an article at BuzzFeed last year that was a little bit controversial. And at the time, I owned my production company. I already made lots of short films. And of course, I had opinion on longer films. But one of the critiques that I got that I thought was fair was that I was critiquing something that I wasn't doing. I hadn't made a full-fledged film. So I thought, it's only fair that I now put my work out there for everybody to judge. And so that's what I did. And part of it also was a business decision. I've gotten a lot of attention for the style of videos I do, which usually involves editorial footage and pulling narratives out of existing footage. And I wanted to show people that me and my team can actually do some original filming as well. So those were the two things that sort of played into my thought process.
Well, one of the other criticisms that you got then, I don't know if it was fair or not, was that you are, in fact, the devil. that was a rough patch. Okay, I want to talk about, let's talk about that, about the rules for filmmaking and media creation and how they've been blown wide open in the digital era. Right-of-center activists are often lamenting that we don't have any control over Hollywood or the mainstream news outlets, or we don't have some George Soros in the background writing us big fat checks all the time. But we really don't need that anymore, do we? Discuss how the barriers to entry have lowered themselves and how easy it is to actually just get going on things like this now.
Well, it's almost silly if you think about it, how people think that there's no hope without the helping hand of the more established industries. I mean, we all pride ourselves on how important the blogosphere is to the media narratives and to the news narratives, and how so often big stories are broken in the blogosphere. Well, why the blogosphere start in the first place? It started because there was a need. Sorry, I saw you.
There was a weirdness in the background.
That's okay.
Okay.
The entire blogosphere started because people were tired of listening to the media's narratives, and so they just started writing. And I don't think anybody could have predicted at the time what would happen, but what ultimately happened was those little scribblings turned into huge websites like Red State and Hot Air and tons of other blogs that are still out there today. So I sort of thought, here I am with this production company, and I'm doing client work. Well, why not see if I can just make something on my own and put it out there and see if people will watch it? And I don't intend to stop doing that. I'm going to use whatever resources I have at my disposal to continue to try to put narratives out there in video or tell stories that aren't being told.
We have a classic example here at PJTV, of course, with Zoe, because he started off, doing the YouTube things in his kitchen or something back in '08, and those exploded. But let's go specifically focus more on video right now. Obviously, there's a learning curve to get from I'm going to go shoot my first YouTube thing to where you are now. But what does a young videographer, if you will, need to get started?
Well, the way that I got involved with, initially it was just editing. The way that I got involved with editing video was truly experimental. In fact, what actually happened was I was doing a podcast at the time, and I thought it would be interesting to go to rallies in D.C. and interview people on the left and take the audio and use it for my podcast. But in order to get the audio, I ended up just using a handheld video camera. So then it turned out that the handheld video camera was perfect for capturing footage that I could cut up. So I just cut it up and made my own videos. And before I knew it, people were telling me I was good at it. So what I always tell people is you need to experiment first. Just start trying to make stuff and put it out there for people to judge. The only way that there's two ways you're going to learn. You're going to sit down and have somebody teach you, and that usually costs money. Or you're going to just take a shot on your own. It's all very logical when you get in there. But I think editing is important as the first step. If you don't know how to edit, it doesn't matter how good you are with the video, because you can't do anything with it. Following that, my only advice could be to do the same thing with video cameras. I didn't do that. By the time I got to the point where I could have started investing in doing video myself in terms of filming, I had gotten successful enough with my production company that I just hired a cameraman. And that's how it's worked ever since.
Okay, I want to get back to politics for a second. Let's take a look at this clip from near the end of the movie as a springboard to what I want to ask you next.
Detroit provides the warning of what happens if you go down the path where you're constantly making short-term political goals at the expense of the long-term viability of the city.
They're under external financial management, and when that's gone, given what we know remains in Detroit in terms of city council and mayor, I don't see reform.
We clearly know that we have a financial challenge. Clearly know we have other issues that we have to deal with, but you need to clearly know that we're working on them. And we're not taking them for granted. Again, we're not just asking for, the state to give us a ton of money, a blank check.
All right, in a perfect world, this should be a cautionary tale about short-term political thinking, especially for places like Illinois, California, and eventually the nation itself. As you look around the country, as you travel, as you've been dealing with this stuff, do you see any politicians on the horizon, whether at the state level or the national level, who see it as such, or are they trying to pretend that Detroit's situation is unique?
I think that it's often used by both people. There are people who use Detroit as an example, and they mean it, and it shows in the things that they do. I know it's kind of almost cliche to bring him up at this point, but Ted Cruz is a guy who understands the problem with short-term political decisions guiding our entire policy. But of course, you know, a lot of the others who still seem to guide themselves based on these short-term policies, they also point to Detroit. And they say, this is what happens when we don't, you know, blah, blah, liberal, progressive, da, da, da. And, you know, they sort of give it lip service. Interestingly, the left does point to Detroit as an example of what happens, no joke, when the progressive policies aren't adequately enabled to do their job. So there's certainly lots of different people pointing at the city and using it as a example. One of the reasons I left my own voice out of this documentary was I really wanted to make sure that what I presented was fairly self-explanatory. Just show the timeline. Here's everything that happened from the days when it was a really prosperous city until today. Just what happened. And I think that there should be some agreement, even if not all points are agreed upon within, that the bailouts, while they were probably great for GM specifically, and they were probably in some ways great for Chrysler specifically, in terms of, you know, when you get $85 billion, it tends to help your books. But I don't know that that did anything for the city of Detroit. And I think that that's shown in the condition that it's in. And I think that the left and the right can agree to that.
What you described there about not having spent enough, not having them enacted, and I like to call that Krugmania. Bigger, faster, louder. That's what Paul Krugman's always say. That's his fallback to everything, is they didn't spend enough money on it.
They did not spend enough money.
Yes. Our mutual friend, one of the producers of the movie, Tom LeDuc, mentioned that some people are still not connecting the dots between the politicians who ran Detroit for half a century, actually, and its current situation. Are there people, is that an impossible obstacle to overcome, do you think, in almost any place? Or are there people who are starting to get it there?
I think that people outside of Detroit are starting to get it. I don't know that the people in Detroit are getting it. You know, whenever you've got a government that's working hard to make sure that it is involved in making people's lives better, when it's the government's job to make people's lives better, and then the consequences of that result in people's lives getting worse, I think that people rightfully start making decisions on what they want to happen based on what's going to most make it possible for them to have food on their table next week. And I think that's an understandable position for a lot of people to be in. I mean, you may be philosophically against long-term, extended unemployment benefits, but it's hard to stick by that when you're on your 45th week of unemployment. And so they'll support positions that in the long term are bad for the country, but maybe are good for them in the next few weeks. And I think that's the result of having a overdependence on government, which is the progressive dream. And Detroit embodies that. And so I worry. Yeah, I don't know that they get it, mostly because they're desperate.
Okay, one final question before we let you go, and of course we will direct everyone to where they can go watch the movie on YouTube right now. Okay, one question before the final question. How long are you going to have it available on YouTube?
Well, there's some debate about that, because I'm actually somebody reached out to me, or a few people reached out to me, and there's the potential that we're going to expand this film. If we decide to expand this film, I'll probably leave this version of it on YouTube permanently and make a expanded version available later. So that's really a question right now. Initially, we had planned on only having it up for the month of February. So before the end of this month, I should know the answer to that question.
Okay, and now the final question. You said you left room for discovery on your filmmaking journey here. What personally were you most surprised about while filming this, even if it was something that didn't make it into the final cut of the film? I did not realize how much, and it did make it in. I didn't realize how much people, well, there were two things really. I didn't realize how much people love the city. I mean, I know that may sound silly, but I really didn't. I thought there was probably a lot of frustration. I didn't realize just how connected people felt to the city who lived there. But this may have been naive on my part, I did not realize just how powerfully huge of an economic powerhouse Detroit was in the first part of the 20th century. It's one of the most prosperous cities in all of history. And I don't think that I realized just how far it had fallen. I knew that it was, a city that had great industry, but my goodness, it was a
a long fall from success for that city.
Yeah, I remember visiting there when I was a kid. I have a lot of family in Michigan, and I'm not a young man, but it wasn't that long ago, and it was still a nice place when I was a teenager. Not so much anymore. Hey, Ben, thanks so much for joining us today, and really best of luck with this. You know that. You know I'm on your side.
Oh yeah, I appreciate you bringing me on. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. You can find more about the movie at DetroitBankruptMovie.com. I'm Stephen Kruiser for my friend Ben Howe and everyone here at PJTV. Thank you very much for joining us today.